So I just got finished watching yesterday's episode of the I Am an Athlete podcast with Brandon Marshall, Fred Taylor, Sheldon Crowder, and Chad Ochocinco. And to be completely honest, watching that, first I saw the clip going around on Twitter that broached the topic of do men have safe spaces? Is it cool for men to have safe spaces? Is it cool for men to cry? Etc. etc. Basically challenging the societal norms of what it is being a man. And the thing is, the clip that went viral on Twitter was just a 20-30 second clip talking about why don't men have safe spaces. Not even why don't men have safe spaces. Why don't men talk to each other about stuff like this? And instead of talking about what they could do better, about why don't men do things, instead of giving reasons, instead of giving a list of things of why things like that don't happen, they did a brief little summary, but that was the majority of what came after that. What came after it was improvement. They simply did better. They didn't talk about how they could do better. They simply did it. You know? Chad Ochocinco, which I don't believe he talked until like the 19-minute mark of the entire podcast for the first time, really. He came in and he talked about, losing his mom. And how that affected him mentally. And how that affected him and all the guys essentially not so much bonded, but they had that conversation and they showed an example of what it is like to talk to each other about those tough topics. You talk to each other about those things that really plague you or really haunt your mind. And for that, I've never watched a podcast, to be completely honest. I've always seen clips on Instagram. I've always seen clips, when they had Cam Newton or DK Metcalf. I've always seen those clips. But I've never sat down and watched the whole episode from beginning to end. And I would like to say, for anyone who is like me, who has not seen the podcast yet or never watched it in its entirety, yesterday's episode is a good place to start. It gives you a true understanding of just the brotherhood between these four guys. Just how well they gel with each other, talk to each other. You can tell that this isn't just a ragtag group of athletes coming together for a podcast. No, these are highly educated guys who really, really care for each other, both business-wise, personal-wise, mental-wise. Like, you can tell. You can feel the love between each other, especially at the end when they did the group hug. And even when Chef Nancy came out and she gave her testimony, and the prayer at the end really brought everything together, to fill those creases and those cracks and those crevices that they may feel from what they experienced. So my reaction to the podcast, and as far as whether or not men should have safe spaces, is do exactly what the podcast did. They broached the topic, and instead of having a yes or no argument about it, they simply said, no, we're here for each other, so let's be here for each other. And that's what they did. They talked to each other about their families, about their mental health, about how their business is going, and they went around the room. And that's how these conversations need to go. There doesn't need to be an argument about whether or not it should happen. Just make it happen. And that's valid.